Uh, um, I've been in here trying to fix these wires and get this smoke out of the way. Other than that, but we've got time for this too. But seriously, we'll get right to it. Coach is going to talk about how well he actually uniquely his talents fit what we're trying to do with our defensive scheme. He'll talk about that, and then Stephen will talk and answer any questions you have about the strategy. But we certainly were pleased when he was there for us. We did not and were not tempted to move up, and we certainly had. I will address his anything about his neck, his injuries. We're completely clean there as far as we're concerned, totally satisfied that we're in good shape, have thoroughly given that a real evaluation and are okay with that. So with no further ado, Stephen, comments or take questions.
Is there any consideration to trade up at all for Derwin James?
No, we were very comfortable with the way the draft was coming to us, and there was a player or two we would have considered moving up for, but once those kind of went by the wayside, then we were very comfortable with what was sitting there for us, and really felt like we were going to get a really good football player. And we got 10 draft picks, and we're fortunate to have those, and we really think we got great opportunities to use those picks as we move forward. But we were very comfortable sitting there, and one of the reasons was Leighton. So we felt really good about where we were sitting.
Let me ask the other question. Did y'all think about moving back at all?
No. Once we got there and Leighton was there, we were ready to make a pick. We didn't want to take a chance on losing him.
What sort of impact can Leighton make, Jason?
We just think he's a really good football player. We spent a lot of time with him, went out to Boise and worked him out. Obviously spent time at the Combine with him, and we had him in here and felt like we really knew him. And he's a pretty unique guy. He's got some unique combinations of traits. He's 6'5", he's 250 pounds. He can run. You watch him play. He goes from sideline to sideline, making a lot of plays in the running game. He can make plays in the box. He can make plays in space. Maybe his best quality is his ability to cover the pass. He's a big-time defender, both in zone and as a man-to-man cover guy. He's created turnovers throughout his career. Was named a captain there and really embraced that role for his team. We talk about the right kind of guy. He's the right kind of guy in every way. We're just excited to have him in here.
Jerry, you have another player like Vander Esch at all in your time with the Cowboys?
Rolando McClain, as far as being able to cover the gaps as well as drop back and get to the windows and basically have the span as well as have the instinct to give us the pass defense we want. The combination of letting us play with the guys we want to up front, him cover the gaps, be there for the gap, yet be able to be instinctive enough to drop back and have that pass skill. That's why we pictured him as a unique fit for our philosophy on defense.
Jerry, you talked earlier about this draft falling to you, falling right to you because of the run-on quarterback. That kind of thing went.
Clarence, I mean it. I'm not messing with you. Repeat that. I didn't hear it.
No, you talked before the draft about the draft hopefully falling right to you guys because of the run-on quarterback, so a position that a guy could fall to you or the guy that you wanted to fall to. That's kind of how things went for y'all throughout this afternoon.
Well, our early discussions, I don't want to get into any other player or players. We were called to trade down. We never tried to trade up on any basis. And we saw it coming our way. We liked, we certainly, again, had this player picked out early as a key, unique element to how we can play defense around here. And so it was coming, and we just felt like the prudent thing to do was not really get up here and reach. It was very expensive getting up there today, very expensive. We've got good use for those picks as we look at these other needs and caliber of the players there. So I don't think we had calls to go down, but none. Stephen, you can correct me.
No, we didn't have any.
Yeah.
What were your thoughts when Green Bay went in front
think we had heard maybe that Green Bay was in the market for a backer, and we thought that might be a concern. I mean, you always worry about that. Team moves up, and I think word had gotten out a little bit that we had an interest in Leighton, and so we sat there a little pressure packed because he was obviously the guy at the top of our board at that time, and we certainly hoping that he was going to be there for us once we had waited it out. But we had other good players there that we could have been comfortable with, but obviously he was our preference at that point.
Jason, where do you envision starting Leighton playing at?
We feel like he can play both the Mike and the Will spot, and in our defense he can play the Sam spot as well. But best suited probably for Mike, but has the physical traits to play Will. And as oftentimes we're in situations in base defense or nickel defense where we're playing three linebackers for those two spots. And again, having a frontline player, also having depth, being able to play the different situations, he fits all of that stuff. And we feel like he's a quick study. He knows the game well. He can learn the game well. So we're hopeful that he can make a big impact right at the outset.
What's the impact on Jalen, and how all these things?
Well, we love Jalen, and Jalen's made so much progress. You heard me say this a lot during the year when Jalen was playing what we felt were the appropriate number of snaps last year. He played very well. And he had to absorb the injuries to Hitchens and to Sean Lee, and that's the only time he probably wasn't playing up to what our expectation was. He's getting better physically. He's getting better in his understanding. And again, we've been in situations where we've had two linebackers playing those three spots, whether it's in base or nickel. And so to have those guys, to have Sean and Leighton and Jalen working there at the Mike and the Will spot, that's big for us.
I had visions. I remember Rolando McClain intercepting that ball in that rain game in Miami, Romo's first game back, and that McClain stepped up there and made that play coming out of there. The point is, I'm going to steal something from Will McClay since he's not here. Will said, this guy said it several times this week, this guy will get us some turnovers. He's got those kinds of instinct and that kind of range, and so he can get the ball back.
How were y'all able to determine that Leighton's neck was good to play? How were y'all able to determine that Leighton was healthy and that his neck wasn't a concern going into the season?
Well, we through very competent examinations, both not only certainly at the combine, but then our own additional investigation, and. The thing that I will tell you is that we gave him every grade that is required to draft him in the first round, medical grade. Our independent doctors as well as our trainers gave him a medical grade that allows us to draft him first round. I know I'm being redundant, but I want to be clear about that. I do not stand here concerned about his medical situation.
Was there any decision, or did you guys consider Calvin Ridley or DJ Moore, anybody at the wide receiver position there?
We considered them all. There were a lot of good players. Leighton was one of those guys that we targeted, and we were hopeful that he would come there for us. He was the highest rated player on our board at the time, and again, we felt like he fit a need for our football team, but more than that, just someone who could make an impact on our football team.
Jerry, what did you think of the crowd tonight over there in the stadium?
Well, it was exciting. It was energizing. At all times, especially when we got on that clock, I was particularly interested, and I was glad to see Roger Staubach throwing that ball to Pittsburgh. I don't know how many of those he did in his career, but he did a good job tonight going to Pittsburgh. But I thought that was a good job on their part. But it was great, and seriously, the commissioner had to feel good walking out there with those beloved Cowboy players here in Dallas, Texas. I know I'd like to have that group with me any place I go in Dallas. I can get a smile.
Steve, I know y'all just said that Leighton was the highest rated player on your board, but is there any similar feeling this year to last year in the sense that maybe you didn't like what would be there for you at linebacker tomorrow or the next day, similar to what y'all did with Taco and the cornerbacks?
No. I think this was strictly a deal where we were, just evaluating who would be our best player. I think one thing that was really important for us is, this guy's got a very low floor and a very high ceiling, in my opinion. I think he's got a chance to be a 10-year player here. I don't want to put any more pressure, and he's already got on him being a first-round pick. But, I think we could wake up here and this guy could be a special football player for our organization. And, when you start to get to the latter half of the first round, that's a mouthful to have those type of expectations. But I do think he fit in that mold of some of the players we were looking at that could be guys that you not only can be successful for you for the first 5 years of their career, but, guys you want to sign up for that second contract. I mean, that's huge. And we all know how rugged free agency is. And trying to go in there, as I said, I think when you're having to do that, it's because you're in the penalty box for not drafting well. I give Will a lot of credit, and, how he's worked with our coaches, our scouting staff, Jerry and myself, and, we've been able to draft well, and we've got a lot of really good football players on this team that we do want to have here for 10-plus years. So, that's a good thing. And I think Leighton could very well fit in that category, whereas maybe some of the other guys that we were looking at, were a little more, not that they wouldn't be, but a little more questionable. We just felt very strong about what he could bring to the table and, his uniqueness. As we said, he's 6'5", 250 pounds, and that's not your typical, 43 linebacker. It's, I think he brings something special.
Jason, you mentioned the right kind of guy from a very small town in Idaho who's really had to market himself throughout his football career. How important is that sort of diagnosing the character part of it all?
It's a huge part of it, and our scouts do a great job of that. We talk a lot about that throughout the evaluation process. We get a chance to spend time with them at the combine when they come here, and that's really the big question. What makes these guys tick? Are they driven? Do they love football? All of those kinds of things. And he checked every one of those boxes, and our scouts do a great job doing all that due diligence, talking to their high school coaches, talking to the trainers and everybody. His head coach was actually in our building today and had a great visit with him about the kind of young man that he is, and there's just great evidence of that. It's one thing for people to say that about a particular player, but there's evidence all the way through. He was a walk-on at Boise. Again, played 8-man football. So he came up the hard way, ended up being the best player in their program, the captain of their team, and really the face of their program. So he does things the right way. He loves it. He's mentally tough. He's physically tough. And we're excited about who he is, as well as the kind of player that he is.
Is there something, Jason, about the Boise program that you like in terms of defenders? Goes back to Lawrence, Crawford, back to Skinner.
You have to be careful about that, ascribing traits to a guy just because of the school that he came from. But there's something about that program that grows him the right way. And it's competitive, it's hardworking. A lot of those guys are a little bit under the radar as they're coming out of high school, and so there's a hunger to them. We had that with Orlando Scandrick, Tyrone Crawford, DeMarcus Lawrence, Kellen Moore. We can keep going. We've had a lot of success with those kinds of guys, and it just seemed like Leighton is exactly like the rest of them. Loves ball, has a little chip on his shoulder, and is a driven guy in everything in his life. So we're excited about that part of it.
In drafting Ezekiel Elliott a couple of years ago, what were your thoughts when you saw Saquon Barkley go to the Giants and facing him now twice a year?
Obviously, Saquon's a big-time player. He's one of the best players in the draft and certainly one of the best players in college football. And, all you have to do is watch that Penn State tape. Rich Dalrymple and I were talking about it. We'd get to the hotel every week on the road, and you put the college game on as you're putting your bags down, and it seemed like he was running in for a touchdown. So, we recognize that. They got a really good football player, and our work's cut out for us.
Stephen, how does the outcome tonight affect the outlook or the urgency of receiving?
I think, we talked about that extensively today, and, we're really pleased, with what we did in free agency, with Hearns and Deontay, and, adding that, we're already +1. If you think about us losing a receiver, we added 2. And, usually we like to carry 5, but at the same time, we welcome competition. And we really believe there's some receivers in this draft throughout, from 1 through 7, that have some unique traits. And obviously, The receivers that are in the first part of the draft, the first, second, third round, are obviously going to be a little more seasoned, not as developmental, but we really like a handful of those guys. So I still think there's an opportunity to bring some competition in here. We really like how the draft's laying out for us right now. As we said, we can use, these draft picks are just so precious when you think about what it takes if you don't hit on these guys to go out and replace them. So we really like what's there at receiver, and just didn't feel the urgency based on what we did in free agency to really have to go out and reach and stretch for a receiver.
Steven, you have about 17, 18 guys you have as first-round picks. Are all those guys off the board, or are there some left?
We actually reduced that. We ended up with about 15 guys in our first round when it was all said and done. We dropped a few guys back and out, when we really did really looked at it. But, we feel really good about what's left on our board. And I think there's going to be a great opportunity to improve our football team with our 9 remaining draft picks. And,
The criticism, if there is any, about Leighton is that he's very athletic, he's not very physical. Is that fair?
I would say that, well, I probably should let Jason answer it, but I'd say this about him. I mean, obviously, he came from 8-man football, and he's a walk-on, and he's developed quickly. And, I think that's something that, can develop. But, at the end of the game, the object is to get the guy on the ground. And, there's been a lot of great football players that come out of college that weren't necessarily a knock-'em-back type football player. But this guy has such unique skills on the ball. As Jason mentioned, his pass coverage, is filling the gaps. He's long. He's 250 pounds. And, that just didn't really concern us. I mean, Jason, you may want to add to that.
Yeah, I guess the only thing I would say to add to it is there's no question about his willingness, his mental and physical toughness. But sometimes when you're 6'5", your leverage as a striker is a little bit more challenging. If you think about guys who have that same kind of body type, it's hard for those guys to get low, and they might not deliver this striking blow that a 6'1" linebacker might be able to. But like Steven said, getting them on the ground, making plays on the ball, sideline to sideline, in the box, in the passing game, you see all of that on the tape.
So it's more like a technical thing that was some coaching thing.
Well, you certainly can improve, but also just his height. It's harder for those guys to get lower and get under guys and strike them and knock them back like a smaller guy would. But his willingness to stick his nose in there and make plays, it's well documented.
Saying his background, limited background, obviously 8-man football, one season starter, you perceive him as an ascending player, guy with high ceiling.
Yeah, I don't think there's any question about that. And he's just one of those guys that you see almost get better week by week. And like I said, he went from being a walk-on in their program to probably the best player in their program. And there's no question in our mind he has a huge upside.
Did you find yourself looking at seeing any 8-man football? Have you ever seen it before? Just wanted to get a look at it at all?
I didn't, but we all ask that question. My biggest concern when you hear a guy with that background is playing linebacker, does he have instincts for the game? Is he seeing the blocking assignments and guys pulling and how those trigger keys for a guy who's been playing 11-man football his whole life? And that really didn't seem to be an issue. When we asked the question, we watched the tape, that wasn't a concern.
We anticipate Leighton's helicopter arriving around 1:30 tomorrow, and hopefully have a 2 o'clock, in that neighborhood, 2 o'clock press conference. So thank you very much and appreciate your adaptability.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, guys.